Let's dance. Well, hey everyone. Justin Dark here. JD. Twisted Dark Justin. Mila Love Imp and all the other names I've gone by in the last year or so. Yeah. It's been a hot minute since I picked this camera up and done another discussion video or talking about something. I believe the last time I've spoken about something was the Twisted Metal TV show. Yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've picked up the camera and started talking about stuff. The reason for that is just because I've mainly been focusing on my second channel, which I highly encourage you all to subscribe to it if you haven't already. Twisted Art Productions. That channel has blown up in the last few months. You know, it's gotten a lot of views and subscribers. I have almost 500 on there, which is like quadruple of what I wanted originally for 100. So everyone, I've been doing great on that channel, man. That channel's been a good passion project of mine, and unfortunately, because of the passion projects, I've had no time to film any discussion videos or just want to pick up the camera and talk, because I feel like, you know, things are just weird now. You know, if you talk about stuff online, you know, you always have the risk of people just coming in and shitting on you, taking their pants off and all over the comment section, giving you death threats for no fucking reason, that sort of deal. But I am in the mood tonight to talk about something I've been wanting to talk about for a couple months now, because I do think it's something worth mentioning. It's worth talking about on camera, and I really do want to talk about it. So that audio you just heard on my computer, that was a clip from a video game that I personally, I beat it about a couple months ago. I've spent a month trying to beat it. It's a game called Killer7. Now, Killer7 is, I don't want to call it a game at this point, man. It was more or less a really trippy experience. It was an experience. I'm telling you. That game is something else, man. Alright, so let me back up for a minute, because I want to explain how I found out about Killer7. It's kind of a weird way I found out about it, but it's kind of the same way I found out about Honey Pop, you know? Someone mentions it on, like, you know, a page. For me, the reason I found out about Killer7 was because someone told Bill Jensen, the Christianity Hotline guy, to play it. Now, when someone said Killer7, I did not know what the fuck they were talking about. I'm like, Killer7? I look up Killer7 and I find shit like this. Polygonated, cutscenes of anime-looking characters. It looks like a polygon anime. There's my man Kulon back there. I'll show you the cutscene in a second. But basically, in a nutshell, Killer7 is one of the trippiest and probably one of the hardest games I've ever played. You know, it's basically a game where you play as a syndicate called the Smiths. The Smith Syndicate. The Killer7. There's like 7 characters. Technically 9 if you count Harmon and Garcian, but anyway, back to what I was saying. Killer7 is an experience. It's a game where you play as some of these characters, each with their own special abilities. You know, we got Dan Smith, who's one of my personal favorites. He's the guy with the pistol. He's got that suit on. He looks pretty cool. He looks like he came straight out of a Japanime. And yes, I said that in the game. He looks like he came straight out of a Japanime, which, kind of yes. Then we've got Kaid Smith, who's like this skimpy dress. She got like a bloody dress that's like skimpy, and she's probably the most sexualized looking character in the entire game. But there's a reason she's wearing that dress, and I'll get into that in a bit. But she's got like this scoped pistol, so you can zoom in and shoot. She's got a pretty good ability. Then we got Kevin, who's kind of like the he's kind of the guy who can turn invisible, and he got like spikes coming out of his hands. He's honestly pretty slow when it comes to killing enemies, but he's not that bad in my opinion. Then we got Coyote Smith, who's like this American-based character who's like wearing a jacket, and he's like He's like an American criminal. He can pick locks and whatnot. Then there's Masked the Smith, who's probably the most powerful of the group. He shoots grenades and he wears a freaking Luka Muka, the lucha, the macho wrestler type mask. He wears that damn mask. His name's Masked the Smith. Then we've got Con Smith, who's like the kind of like the hippie of the group. He got like this bandana over his eyes. He got headphones on. He's got these sneakers. He's like, oh yeah, dude, right on. He's got 2 pistols. I kind of like playing as him. He came in handy with fighting Ayami Blackburn. I will get into that, man. That was the worst. Anyway, Khan's pretty cool. Then we've got, of course, the leader, Garcian, but he's not in control. The main leader is actually, well, Garcian's the cleaner, actually. He's not the leader, he's the cleaner. Basically, you only play as that guy whenever you need to revive another character. I don't like playing as Garcian unless I really have to, which is kind of the point. But Garcian's like, and by the way, he's voiced by the same guy who did Grim from Billy and Mandy, which is really, actually a lot of actors are from those shows, but yeah, Garcian's not my favorite, but he's technically the main character if you think about it. And then, of course, we got the old man in the wheelchair, this Harmon Smith, the oldest of the group, and he's kind of like the Professor Xavier of the Killer7. He's this old man in a wheelchair, he's got a big-ass gun in the back, and the main villain is this guy, Kun Lan. I love that guy. This is the most badass cutscene in the entire game. I will say this. This is a badass cutscene right here. Boom! I love this shit, man. I'll explain the story in a minute, but this is a really weird story. I love that guy.
The size of the world has changed. It's changed to the size where you can control it with your hands, just like a PDA. The world will keep getting smaller.
Oh yeah. That cutscene is so fucking badass. I cannot express how much I love that cutscene. You know, he grabs the bullet out the window, and Kun is one of the most badass villains in the entire series or the entire game. But anyway, yes, what you just saw was the end of chapter 1 called Angel. Basically, the game is like has a really weird story, and apparently there's a lot of cutting during development that kind of hurt the story a little bit because it kind of falls flat towards the end. But anyway, I will explain it as best as I can. Basically, you start the game out, you're getting introduced to some of the characters. Like, you're walking, Garcian's walking down the street, he hands something to a guy named Gregory Mills, who's kind of like his friend and colleague. And pretty much, Garcian goes inside a building, and Dan Smith, he turns into Dan Smith, because Dan Smith is another character that he can, you know, be controlling. And basically, Dan Smith goes in there. Apparently they got reports that, that there was these demon people called the Heaven Smiles. They were killing people in this large building. So basically, the Killer7 were sent there to go take them out. They're there to flush them out. And these are the guys you will mostly be fighting throughout the entire game. Basically, playing the game, you walk around, and if you hear laughter from these Heaven Smile guys, which are basically these suicide bombing terrorist demons. I'm not fucking kidding, that's what they are. These guys are vicious, they got these teeth, they look like demons, and they will explode themselves on you. They are dangerous, they are vicious, and they are a pain in my ass, but Heaven Smile is their name, and they ain't no heaven. They ain't come from heaven, man. But they're smiling, and they're smiling because they killed me, but anyway. Throughout the game, you will encounter all these smiles, and the first chapter is basically you going through this giant building, killing all the smiles, solving a puzzle with the candles, and the, you know, getting a ring so you can get the fire on them, and it's a puzzle game and an action shooter or really a stop and run shooter. Like, if you hear laughter, you have to stop and aim your gun. It's actually a really unique way of playing a video game, but this game is more than just a game to me, man. It's like a experience. It really is like an experience. But anyway, Chapter 1 pretty much sums up that you're going to this building, you're killing all the spies, and you go to like the 3rd floor, you get to the top, and you end up going inside a room, which is guarded by a guy called the Gatekeeper. He basically needs you to collect these shells, right? You have to collect shells from solving the puzzles and shit. And once you get enough shells, Chapter 1, I think you only need 2 shells. Once you get most shells, you can go in, you can, go confront Kunlun, who's actually disguising himself as an angel girl. I don't know why he did that, but anyway, you go in there, you can pretty much tell after you fight the angel that this is like, oh, this is a Kunlun, he's standing behind her. You shoot Kun, you get a cutscene that's really funny. I think is the one I showed at first. It's Friday night. There's always time for fun. That's one of the best cutscenes, by the way. But yeah, you pretty much, Chapter 1's pretty simple. You go into a building, you kill all the demons, and then you confront Kunlun, who's the leader of the Heaven Smile. He's the guy controlling all of them. But then Chapter 2 rolls around. Now, Chapter 2 is where it gets really interesting, because we assume that these were like some otherworldly beings. They were creepy demons that were killing people in this big building. You see people get killed in Chapter 1. It's actually pretty gruesome half the time. I'm not kidding. When the characters get killed in the cutscenes, just boom, explosions. Chapter 2, though, you get an anime cutscene. It looks like an anime. I'm not kidding. Some of these cutscenes look like a real anime, and that's really cool that some of them look like it, but some of them don't look like that at all. I'm like, ugh. Some just look like polygons, just talking polygons, but mainly Chapter 4 or whatever.
Guys who call themselves the handsome men?
Look at this, like, this looks like an anime.
To counter the Heaven Smiles. But what's funny is that they look like
oh, yeah,
heroes
those
from
guys.
an underground.
But yeah, like, some of the cutscenes look like anime. And it's really impressive how they got that in the game. And the game is on GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Steam. So I played on the GameCube emulator, and it was an experience. Like I said, it was pretty fun. But anyway, back to Chapter 2. It establishes that the Heaven Smile aren't these demons. They are a group of terrorists, and the whole story is actually about a different world. It's like an alternate world where all the problems between America and Japan have been resolved, And there's like a bridge and whatnot linking them together. It's kind of like world peace. It's actually kind of beautiful. But apparently a new threat was on the rise. The Heaven Smile, or the Smiling Faces, who are a group of suicide-bombing terrorists. And it's weird that in the cutscene, they look like people in suits that are just blowing themselves up. But you still play the game, they're still demons. It's just, that's how Garcian sees them. They're little demon guys that are coming at you laughing, and they also evolve throughout the story. You have to fight different versions of them throughout. You get introduced to so many new ones per chapter. Chapter 2 introduced a lot of new ones, like the Spear Smile, which are basically just these rolling ones. I want to say like the Exploding Bomb Head Smile. Those are some of the more frustrating ones, but not that bad. Chapter 2 pretty much has you go into a sushi restaurant or whatever. You're trying to go find this Japanese legislator or whatever, this politician, right? The game has a very heavy political tone. Like, it kind of talks about some stuff that could, definitely, reflect how the political climate was back in 2005. In fact, we need a game like that now, shit. But anyway, back to the Chapter 2. You go in there and you try to find this Japanese politician, and basically when you go to a sushi restaurant, you do a few puzzles, and you also go into the outside area, do some puzzles out there. I believe it was the puzzle where you have to flip like some boards or open some doors with pictures of animals on them, and once you get it right, you can go through and yeah. But anyway, Chapter 2, when you meet with the politician guy, it turns out one of the The politician's assistant, Julia Kasugi, she's actually an assassin. She ends up killing him instead of Harmon. Like, Harmon was supposed to kill him. No, she was an assassin too, and pretty much that chapter ends with a boss battle between you and Julia. And she dies right after. It wasn't really a hard boss, but yeah, chapter 2 was pretty interesting. It establishes a pretty important part of the lore that chapter 1 pretty much had nothing to do with, because it feels like chapter 1 was just like a warm-up for the big adventure you're going to go on. But chapter 2 ends. Chapter 3 now, this is where the game gets really weird. Chapter 3, oh my god. How do I explain it? So it feels like the game shifts in tone with chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts out with Garcian, like usual, eating his dinner, you know, or eating his lunch, watching TV and hearing the radio and whatnot. On TV, though, there's this weird guy. The name's Andre Almeida. And I have a feeling something's gonna happen back here. And he's like on TV talking about jacking off and talk about women, and like, bro, this is a weird guy in Texas. It's a weird Texas guy named Andre Almeida. He's an interesting one. But basically, he goes on TV, starts going crazy, talking about coming. Yes, he says, I'm coming. Ooh. And he's like, and then he calls Garcia. He says, I call Garcia Smith. Please come see me in Texas or some shit. So Garcia saw that, and he's like, so he goes to Harmon and says, oh yeah, I need to go to Texas. This guy is causing some trouble in the South. And Harmon has to stay behind, unfortunately, on this chapter, which, it's alright. But anyway, Garcian ends up seeking Andre out. Of course, before you go to Texas, there's a very fucking weird scene with this girl named Samantha. She's actually Harmon's maid, his caretaker, and possibly definitely his sex partner or something. Like, Harmon has this girl named Samantha. When we first see her, she's quiet, she's wearing a maid outfit, she seems pretty friendly, she saves your game for you. But then you start to realize there's something up with her when you see her in the skimping clothing and she's like having sex with Harmon. Yes, I'm not kidding. This college girl's having sex with an old man in a wheelchair. That scene was actually kind of disturbing, to be honest. She's like, bro, so it went from Andre on the TV talking about coming to showing Samantha moaning. I'm like, oh my god, really? Are you kidding me? Anyway, after that cutscene, that horrible cutscene, it's explained that, yeah, Harmon has to stay behind. They go to Texas to meet with Andre Almeida. But first, you have to ask the townsfolk about Almeida. You have to kill a bunch of Heaven Smiles, and this is where the Heaven Smiles start to get really frustrating. There's one called the Giant Smile, which is basically a towering smile. You cannot shoot him. What you have to do is let him explode on himself, and you have to run away, because he'll take time to fall. But at first I didn't know what the fuck to do. And I want to say this is also the chapter where the Sideways Smile was introduced, because Sideways Smiles are the most annoying in my opinion. They've got these panels on their arms, you have to shoot them, they will turn around for like a split second, you gotta shoot their back. If you even miss the shot, they turn right back around. Thankfully they're a little bit slow, but man, they're a bitch and a half to deal with. But yeah, you go to Texas, you're basically going around like a Texas town, you're asking the town folk about Almeida, and it's a really interesting chapter, but like, it feels like there was no point. But you go to Texas, you solve some puzzles there, you go inside some houses. It's actually a pretty nice chapter. I mean, I do like the environments in the game. By the way, the game may look kind of like a polygon mess, but some of the environments are pretty cool looking, I'll admit. But anyway, what was I saying? So you go meet with Almeida. Now, Almeida has some of the weirdest cutscenes in the entire game. I mean, hold up. I'm not watching that. They're showing me the scene with Samantha. No, I don't want to watch that. See, this game has a lot of cutscenes.
Almeida, I just met him today.
So you're asking the town folk about Almeida. But this is where, this part right here is like, this is the weirdest part.
Flirting with fucking death itself. I want you to kill me. If I catch Heaven's smile, you gotta kill me.
Yeah, so when you meet with Andre Almeida, on TV he was a guy with a Texas Bronco t-shirt, but when you meet him he's wearing like a spacesuit for some freaking reason. I don't know why he's wearing a damn astronaut suit. But you go meet him, he just wants to be killed because he wants to be reborn or some shit. I want to assume that's what happened. Because he gets reborn, you have to fight him. And then this is like one of the trippiest cutscenes, man.
Now I'm going mad. I can't control this urge to kill. What are you gonna do about it?
When I first saw this, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I was playing a game and now I'm watching anime. Hey, look at this shit. And then he gets reborn as like this thing, and I fought that thing. Like, what is this shit?
Take cover! Hurry!
This is the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. I remember when I first saw it, it freaked me the fuck out. I mean, I fought that thing. Oh my god. See? Look at this. I essentially fought an afro-headed demon in the game. He became a heaven smile with like a freaking rainbow afro. I'm not kidding. Like, this is just... But thankfully, he died in one hit. When you fight the Almeida demon, it's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is run around in a few circles. You have to find his tail. Now, his tail is a very tiny shot, but one shot, he's dead. He falls down, and there's a cutscene that plays pretty much showing that, like, oh, the people realize, oh, our leader is dead. And this one guy takes over, so, like, it's kind of a sad ending for Almeida, but he was just one of the craziest, creepiest weirdos in the entire game. But speaking of creepy, Chapter 4 definitely takes the cake. Chapter 4 is actually one of the best chapters, but also one of the most fucked up chapters, if you ask me. Chapter 4, after you beat Almeida, there's a Chapter 4 cutscene that introduces a new character. He is another villain. He's actually lieutenant for Kunlun. He's actually Kunlun's lieutenant. His name is Curtis Blackburn. And he was actually Dan Smith's arch enemy back like 30 years before or some shit. Now, Curtis Blackburn is probably one of the most interesting yet most disturbing villains in the entire game. You thought Almeida was disturbing? Yes, visually, Almeida is disturbing. He's this naked black guy or whatever with the afro, and he's really weird. He's talking about coming and jerking off. I'm like, well, when you look at Curtis Blackburn, he might actually be the most evil villain. He's also creepy. The Chapter 4 intro cutscene has him, pretty much it shows Curtis like putting in some bullets. He's in a car. He ends up shooting a prostitute. Steps out the car, goes into a bank, shoots a bunch of people in the bank, and then at the end, it actually shows a little girl sitting on the couch for some reason. And we don't see it, but it's implied that he killed her and he enjoyed it. Because apparently Curtis Blackburn is a creepy and he has no heart. See, the Killer7, they kill people because the government sends them to. But Curtis Blackburn is just an evil son of a bitch. I will admit, Curtis Blackburn is the most disturbing villain in the entire game. He's this like gray-haired guy, he's the lieutenant for Kunlun, and he's also like, you know, kind of like a guy who owns kind of like a racket of... Let's just say he's a criminal boss and he likes to turn out young girls. He is a very disturbing character. He's interesting, he's also pretty evil, but he's also really disturbing. And... so basically, Curtis Blackburn, you pretty much get sent, it's actually a two-part chapter. First part is, I guess, easy enough until the end. The first part, you're going to this fun land. You know, you go to an amusement park, which is probably the most interesting level. You go inside a haunted house, out an arcade, throughout, like, it's just a pretty cool-looking level. Now, the level was all good and dandy until I got up to the boss. Ayami Blackburn is the worst boss in this whole freaking game. See, the boss battle with, the Angel or Kunlun Angel, that was easy enough, The Julia boss battle, yeah, sure. Even Almeida, who took one hit, yeah, he's alright. But Chapter 4 really pushed me with the boss battle at the end of Part 1 of Chapter 4. Ayami Blackburn, who was like this young anime-looking chick, yeah, she was speaking Japanese and everything. She is the worst, bro. I can't explain it. So pretty much, Ayami Blackburn is like this anime-looking chick. She has a skirt, she runs around, and she pretty much goes around a parking lot. You're in a parking lot, you have to shoot her for like 15 minutes straight if you want to beat her. And I kept dying over and over. I had to get a save state just to beat her, yes. Ayami Blackburn is the worst boss in this whole freaking game. 15 minutes. And that doesn't count the fact that I kept dying. I had to keep restarting and get my save state out. I kept having to save every time I hit her. She'd run around really, really fast. You could only shoot her when she was in the light of the parking lot. And she would throw a cascade of bullets all at you. And it's like, bro, can I not beat this? Is it just impossible? It's possible to beat it, but it's a pain in the freaking ass. I am not going to kid you. Ayami Blackburn, at least the first boss with her, was the worst. Worst boss in the game. Wasted like freaking an hour just to beat it. Like, what the heck? Did they really have to make her that strong? Like, she runs too fast. You can't aim at her in time. The light thing especially gets me because you can only get her when she's in the lights. Like, are you kidding me? But when I did beat it, it kind of ended with her just getting on a bus and leaving. I'm like, where's she going? Anyway, but that was the end of Part 1 of Chapter 4. Chapter 4 has a Part 2. Part 2, you go to Curtis Blackburn's house, which is probably the best way to, go confront Curtis Blackburn. Why not? In his house, in his, facility. And it has high security, so it's kind of good to play as Kevin Smith here, because he can turn invisible with his, little visor thing. And he can turn invisible, and he can sneak past all the guards. But there's a few puzzles to do here, and it's a pretty big level. And it has a pretty good soundtrack. I never mentioned this, but Killer7 has such a killer soundtrack, no pun intended. Killer7's music's pretty freaking cool. I love that. I have most of the soundtrack on my phone. But anyway, back to Curtis Blackburn's hideout. Pretty much, you go throughout the place, you're looking for clues, how to get, to Curtis. You do fight Ayami Blackburn again in, like, the basement. But it's not as hard. I mean, it's still kind of challenging, but it wasn't as hard because at least she's in, like, a smaller enclosed area. And when you shoot her, though, when you're finished getting rid of Ayami Blackburn, you find out she's actually a real woman or something. I'm like, oh, she's not an anime chick, so why is she a woman? It's not really clear why it's like that, but anyway. So pretty much you beat that part. And you get a clue, you find out that Curtis Blackburn was actually waiting inside of a hidden area inside of his pool. You have to drain his pool and go inside the door. From there you can confront him, and you can only fight him as Dan Smith. Thankfully. Fittingly, you can play as Dan Smith, you have to play as Dan Smith. And basically the boss battle is kind of like the quick draw thing from Kirby. So pretty much, Curtis and Dan, there's a cutscene with them, it's actually pretty cool. He's like... Dan's actually kind of a badass. He's like, Danny boy, you've changed in the last 30 years. Into a badass, if I may. And Dan's like, yeah, and you changed too. Into a wrinkly old man. Like, Dan's just such a badass. I love him. He's one of my favorite characters besides Kunlun, so... But anyway, so basically the boss battle is kind of like a quick draw event. The guy, Curtis has a bird on his shoulder, right? When the bird flies off his shoulder... You have to quickly shoot him, otherwise he'll shoot you, It's just a time thing, and you have to make sure the bird is off the shoulder. Sometimes the bird will tease you, go... Well, no, when the bird flies, we go. And thankfully, I beat it on the first try, because I knew what I was doing. I knew the bird would tease you, and I knew what was going to happen, but... I beat Curtis Blackburn. It was actually a pretty satisfying ending. I mean, it's kind of bittersweet, really. Curtis falls over and dies, and... Dan's like, man, you ain't got nothing better to do with your life, and he's like, oh, I guess it's time to put out the curtains, and Dan's like, what, you trying to die in style? Give me a break. And Dan pretty much kills Curtis, man. He like flips a switch and he gets Curtis to hang up on his rack or whatever, like with the rest of his victims. But Dan like walks out looking at the victims in the hallway. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of disturbing that there are still dead people. He didn't get to save them, so it was kind of disturbing. But at least Curtis got his just desserts. Now, Chapter 5. Chapter 5 was probably where the game really started to feel kind of like this is the most anime we've seen in the game so far. Like, Chapter 5 is about, it's called Alter Ego, I believe. And yeah, each chapter have a title. Chapter 1 is Angel. Chapter 2 is Encounter, I believe. Chapter 3, Cloudman. And Chapter 4 is, oh, what the fuck was it called? The chapters have some pretty interesting names, I'll say that. But anyway, Chapter 5 is called Alter Ego. And basically, this one has you go, and basically there's there's this comic book writer. You're supposed to go confront this comic book writer who's trying to, like, challenge the Killer7 with the Handsome Men, who are basically these sexualized-looking Power Rangers. I'm not kidding. One has boobs, some have heels, one's fat. Like, bro, these look like the Power Rangers but more sexualized, which is not a bad thing that, you know, they look like that. It's just like, man, you know, they're supposed to be the Power Rangers. It's kind of weird. Anyway, you go to like this, you know, this villa, you know, you go there, and this is the first time we actually really get to see the characters in the full anime. Like the anime style. Like, Dan shows up and he like talks to the singer guy, he gives him a tip, you know. And it looks like an anime. I'm like, dude, why can't the rest of the cutscenes look like this? I mean, come on, we barely see Kunlun as an anime character. We don't see Coyote, we see Kon as an anime character. But we don't see Kevin, Kaede in the anime style. I'm like, man, it kind of sucks. But anyway. So, most of the cutscenes in Chapter 5 are anime. And basically, you do a bunch of puzzles. You get a really weird cutscene with like a kid that sounds like an old man. Apparently the kid was from another game, and it's just a really weird cutscene that might not have anything to do with anything, but it does. It has something to do with something. I have to look up the thing again, the video explaining what Killer7 really is about. Basically, Chapter 5 is just like one of the most interesting, and this game has 2 discs, by the way. So after you have the cutscene with, or after you watch the cutscene with Dan fighting the black, Punishing Ranger, the Handsome Man, after that cutscene, which is a pretty badass cutscene if I may, I mean, it's like, Dan shows up to confront Trevor, who's the guy making all these comics, and basically he comes in and he's like, hey, what happens if I just shoot you right now? And Trevor's like, oh, it's not gonna happen. I already wrote what happens. And so basically this black Power Ranger looking guy steps in. Dan pretty much gets into a tussle with him. Dan kills him, and the rest of them show up. But the red one was like, all right, fine, we'll meet in New York Times Square and settle this once and for all. And that's pretty much how Chapter 5, Disc 1 ends. You have to put in Disc 2, and Disc 2 starts out with the battle between the Killer7 and the Handsome Men, which was a pretty cool little boss battle. Like, Harmon is there, you know, he's in his wheelchair, and then Red Ranger, for some reason, when you fight Red Ranger, he's in a wheelchair too. I'm like, why is he brought a whole ass wheelchair to the fight, really? To mimic Harmon, but pretty much the Handsome Men kind of mimic the characters you play as. In fact, some are supposed to die. Kaede, Kevin, and I think Coyote maybe? They all die or something, because that's scripted. That's supposed to happen, but anyway, after you beat all the Handsome Men, and here's the funny story. When I had Master Smith versus Purple Ranger, the Handsome Purple, I didn't know what to do, but I figured out, oh, you have to press triangle, because Mass dies, but he comes back as the Handsome Devil. Yes, that's what it's called, the Handsome Devil. That's a really interesting and clever name for a mask, you know, alter ego. Anyway, but after you beat the purple one, you play as Garcian, and Garcian fights the pink one, but you don't play as Garcian, you don't fight the Pink Ranger. All of a sudden, it goes into a cutscene with this girl wearing pink, and she's an avid gamer, and she was like, talk about like journalism or some shit. I'm like, so I don't get to fight the pink one. Because she wasn't real. Apparently this wall wasn't real, man. They were just propaganda. All those rangers that we were seeing, that was just a bunch of propaganda or some shit. I don't know. But chapter 5 ends, and then chapter 6 starts. Chapter 6 is when we learn the truth about the Killer7. Who are they really? Chapter 6 has the Killer7 going into the hotel, which is a very important spot in the story, and I'll explain in a minute. But after the Handsome Men boss battle, you basically go through a hotel, and this is the hardest part of the game, mind you. This is a very, very difficult part of the game. It's like you're going around, there's nothing but smiles running at you, you're in a hotel, and then you have to go up an elevator. It's just, it's kind of a mess. There's quite a bit of enemies. They really did make sure that was the final, you know, that's the final level, pretty much. But basically, you go through the hotel, and eventually you find yourself in a school. You're going around looking for cassette tapes. You know, there's like cassette tapes scattered around the school. You have to figure out what's going on with the place. These cassette tapes all have to do with a certain someone named Amir Parkreiner, who apparently was a 13-year-old boy who killed some people in a school and killed... You know what? Amir Parkreiner is Garcian. I'm just going to say it right here. Yes. In case anyone didn't know, Amir Parkreiner is actually Garcian Smith. They're the same person. It's just the government or something put these memories in Amir's head and made him think he was a man in a suit, but really he was a 13-year-old who murdered the Smith Syndicate. He killed Dan in cold blood. He killed Kaid in cold blood. She got shot while wearing that dress and she fell to the floor. I'm like, oh, so that's why she's wearing that dress and it's covered in blood? Yeah, because they're all essentially ghosts. Killed Khan, shot Kevin on the first floor, killed Master Smith while he was taking a shower. Yes, that's actually what happened. Killed Coyote when he was in his underwear, and yeah, Amir was a 13-year-old by you, and like, bro, he killed all the freaking Smiths. That's what happened in the story. I'm like, oh shit. And there's a scene where you actually meet with a younger Harmon Smith, where he reveals the truth that yeah, you are Amir Parkreiner. We just took you under our wing so we could, you know, help you, we could use you, and it really is a very messed up story. And you can realize that hey, this whole world that they live in is fucked. It's a really messed up world they live in, and you know what? It kind of reflects the world now in a way, but not really. I mean, you don't see people running around with personas and killing people. Well, maybe personas, but anyway, back to what I was saying about Killer7. It's a really, really interesting story. Towards the end, though, it kind of falls apart. So after Garcian figures out that he really is the guy who killed the people that we thought were his friends, turns out he really did kill them, and he was Amir Parkreiner, and at the end, he opens a suitcase, and, by the way, I forgot the guy's name, but whoever voiced Grimm from Billy and Mandy, he did an amazing job as Garcian. Garcian, like, he sounded like, distressed. When he opened that damn case, and it's revealed that he had all the weapons of the characters we were playing as, but they're dead. It was psychological terror. It really was disturbing. Like, oh, we see Kaid's gun, we see masked grenades. I'm like, oh shit. And there's a chapter 7, but it's like the game falls apart at that point. Chapter 7 is called Lion for some reason. And you play as Garcian, but he's wearing a black suit and he's got like glowing green eyes. I'm gonna assume that the world was the reality was falling apart. After chapter 6, the world kind of collapses, and you play as Garcian, who has a golden gun, and it really is a freaking nightmare. You know, you run around shooting multiple smiles that are like blackened, and at the end you shoot Iwazaru, who's this really weird character. I forgot to mention him. Iwazaru is like the guy who gives you tips. He tells you how to play the game. He tells you what you need to do. He looks like a gimp, though. He's wearing a damn gimp suit. He's always like, Master, we're in a tight spot. It's just, there's a lot of weird characters. I did not want to talk about Iwazaru because he's really weird looking. But at the end of the game, you actually shoot Iwazaru, and it turns out the guy who was helping you was also the villain. Kunlun was actually Arazayu the entire time. It's just a fake persona he put on. I'm like, what the hell? And then the game ends. I'm like, is that it? Now, a part of me wishes they would make a sequel, because there's a lot of loose ends. At the end of the game, pretty much, there are so many loose ends that they never tied up. The game was released in 2005. It was re-released on Steam in 2018. There was apparently a game called Travis Strikes Back that pretty much showed that Killer7 is still, you know, kind of a brand from Suda51. They could make a sequel if they wanted to, and I kind of hope they do at one point. At some point, I want them to make some kind of sequel to Killer7. Because there's a lot of loose ends that weren't tied up, and part of me kind of likes... I just like the characters. I don't know. But I played this game, and man, I experienced this shit firsthand. I didn't watch that many videos about it, maybe a few of them, just to see what I was getting myself into. But playing the game is actually really satisfying. Despite the Ayami Blackburn boss, and despite some of the other bosses being kind of like stupid, and some of the story kind of falling apart, like, you know, like, oh yeah, Kunlun disappears halfway through, and I don't know why. You know, I think apparently he's supposed to have more scenes, but obviously they took those out or something. There's also supposed to be a scene where, like, we see Curtis dying at the hands of Harmon instead of, you know, Dan. Dan gets shot by Curtis, you know, that type of deal, but... it's a lot of stuff in that game. That whole game is just like... it's an amazing game, though. It's actually one of my new favorites. I've beaten it at least 2 months ago. It took me a month to beat it, though. It was a very, very difficult game. Took a long time for me to beat it. But when I did, it felt like a good experience. And it became one of my new favorite games. It's, ironically, my 7th favorite game now. 7. Killer7. So yeah, this was me talking about Killer7. One of the most bizarre video games I had ever played. But it was also one of the best games I had ever played. It's a really fun experience. I highly recommend it to people that like weird stuff like I do. You know, it's kind of like a polygon anime that you can play. It's a playable anime with polygons. And the soundtrack's really good. I like the characters. The voice acting is actually pretty good too. I want to say... Debbie Derryberry she voices a few characters in the game, and she's the voice of Jimmy Neutron. I recognize her on sight. I also want to say, Dwight Schultz played a few characters. He actually voiced Harmon Smith, I believe, which is pretty cool because he's really talented. And just, it's an overall good time. And, you know, it might be frustrating in some spots. Trust me, I had a bit of frustration playing some parts. But the parts I enjoyed, I had a lot of good enjoyment out of them. You know, the shooting sections, getting all the smiles in the right spots felt so damn satisfying. Killer7 is just a really good experience. It's a really weird one, though. Like you saw with the Almeida cutscene, it is a really bizarre experience. But it's not a bad game at all. I mean, you know, it has a few flaws, I would not lie. It has some flaws. Like, bro, like, but the boss battles are probably the most flawed thing about the game. The Ayami Blackburn boss can go fuck itself. I cannot stand that little bitch. Yes, I called Ayami Blackburn a B-word. I don't care. But that just shows my frustration for how much I hate that boss battle, man. It's just like, bro. It's just weird. And, yeah. So, I'm Justin Dark. I'm signing out. Have a great Twisted Day. Be sure to subscribe to Twisted Art Productions. That is my main channel at this point. I've been making a lot of content on there. And, yeah. So, I'm going to sign out. And I highly recommend checking out Killer7. That's probably it's one of the weirdest games I ever played. But it was a good experience, and I loved a lot of the characters. You know, and I may have shat on Almeida a bit, but he's kind of also one of the more entertaining characters, so I at least like Almeida for that. But he's also really weird. Like, salvation after the end. He sounds like a damn Texas preacher or some shit. He was kind of funny, though. I thought Almeida was funny. You know, Curtis Blackburn was disturbing. Kunlun is my man, though. I love Kunlun. He's like one of the most badass villains I'd ever seen in a video game. And Dan Smith. Oh, I like Dan Smith. He's my favorite playable character. Kind Kai's pretty cool. I mean, she's, you know, she got a good weapon, and she got that skimpy ass dress. But anyway, and okay, I like young Harmon Smith too. He's pretty cool. He's kind of badass as well. But anyway, enough of my talking. I've talked for at least an hour at this point. Let me talk about Killer7. Have a great Twisted Day, and I'll see y'all next time. And don't forget, subscribe to Twisted Art Productions. I've been making a lot of good content on there, man. That is my new... That's my thing now. I've been at it for like 6 months. Yeah. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and yeah.